Wizards of the Coast in September 2020 released its latest supplementary book for D&D 5e, Icewind Dale Rime of the FrostMaiden, a new book which tries to be Chult, Tomb of Annihilation Part 2, but doesn't really succeed. This latest book takes place in the classic Icewind Dale setting. You may have seen it in classic games like Neverwinter Nights. This, unfortunately, makes it a little bit limited. Now let's start talking about the good things first of all. That atmosphere. If you like John Carpenter's The Thing, this might be a supplement for you. It's got a lot of isolating cold and dark, and it's got a lot of great atmospheric conditions with below freezing temperatures, snowstorms, obscured vision, snow blindness, and whiteouts. And all of these things are great, although, to be perfectly honest, you could just find it in the DMG guide. If you want everything sort of laid out for you, this is a good supplement. I wouldn't say it's quite as useful as Ghost of Salt Marsh, where they lay out all the ship combat and pirate themed stuff, but this isn't too bad. The setting and theme for this book are 10 very small villages in some sort of a Arctic setting where Ariel, who is a goddess, has decided to cast a spell that freezes everything in snow and ice, so it is always winter. She loves beautiful things, so she wants to freeze them and preserve them forever. This is interesting, but it kind of makes a tough setting for a few reasons. Number one is, why would anybody want to go there? Now, it says in the book, it's a place where people go for adventure. Okay, but adventure for what? It's not known for a whole lot of ancient ruins, so there's not a lot of treasure. There's knucklehead fish and whales. So if you're into fishing or whaling, okay, your character might want to go there. The other one that I thought maybe they sort of forgot is fleeing from justice. If you had to, escape a murder charge, or maybe if you had knocked up the mayor's daughter, okay, you got to run off to Icewind Dale, and you got to hang out there until things cool off, if you take my meaning. In terms of gameplay structure, this is sort of a sandboxy game at the beginning, and then they try to narrow it down into a little bit more of a linear adventure. At the beginning, for probably about the first 3 to 4 levels, you're wandering around these different towns, and they have different small quests. One place lost a lantern, there's a tower with some kind of a cult in it, very classic D&D. And there's also, you got to get fish, or you got to get iron for some dwarves. Not quite killing rats or boars, but, they're very low level quests that sort of get you into it. Now, within these villages, there are a little bit of clues as to what's coming up, but nothing really happens until, bam, all of a sudden, a white dragon starts destroying these towns, or at least attacking them. So it turns out the dragon is sent to destroy these villages by Shadrock. And Shadrock is a Durgar who seems to be like a warlock. His patron, he thinks, is the Durgar god of conquest, but actually it's Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine Hells, who for some reason wants to destroy this sparsely populated place. You'd think he'd focus his attention on somewhere a little bit more populous, do a little bit more evil damage, but, everyone's got to have a hobby. So after finding out who's responsible, you have to go invade his fortress, defeat the Durgar. Meanwhile, the dragon is still out destroying villages, so you have to come back out, defeat Shadrock and his dragon, and that sort of ends that challenge. And from there, things get a little more murky. Eventually, you need to defeat this goddess Ariel, or Oriel, I'm not quite sure the correct pronunciation, but you ultimately want to stop her from keeping this ice spell up. You want to reverse it so that summer may return, crops may grow, it's not a desolate piece of crap. So of course you have to go find her and her lair. She has a device which allows her to control the weather. In the end, fight her, defeat her, and it has a few interesting endings. One is that you can summon a Tarrasque, which will then completely devastate this area. If you ended the spell and summoned the Tarrasque, it will destroy the area, and as summer comes, it will wander through the mountains, through the Goliath tribes, into other populated areas. If you don't defeat Ariel and the spell stays, then the terrace eventually goes to sleep because it's cold. Now, I want to bring out one specific ending, which it just made me say, what the hell, wizards? It's possible that your party ends up going back in time before this whole thing began, which is just like, oh, for the love of God, because it says specifically, none of the source books apply, and if you want to continue the adventure with this party, find older source books, like a D&D 3.5 source book, to find out the conditions of all the countries and everything. Like, why? Why should I have to go on eBay to do that? That makes absolutely no sense, wizards. Now, this campaign is set for characters level 1 through 10, so it's another basic starter adventure kind of thing. A lot of groups do go past level 10. I wouldn't say to 20, somewhere between 10 and 15, things tend to peter out. But, well, that's a real campaign killer right there for me. Because if I'm DMing that, I'm sure as heck not going to go and find those books. So we've talked about location. We've talked a little bit about the story, which is, okay. But the other reason people like to buy a lot of these books are for the updates or upgrades or additional magical items and maybe some spells or different play classes. Well, there are no different play classes. I didn't see any upgraded skills. I think that there is, I kind of forget, there was one snow-based background that you could pick, but to be honest, I just read this like a half an hour ago and it didn't stick with me, so probably not something anyone's going to want. And disappointingly, there are only a few items. There's an abracadabrus, which is actually kind of cool. It's a chest that has 20 charges. You can open it up and expend 1 charge and you get non-magical items. So it could be raw materials for crafting, foodstuffs, different liquids. Although it's got a 1 gold piece or less value, still that's pretty good when you need to travel and you need food. Then you have the Cauldron of Plenty, which if you pour water into it and stir for a minute, it makes it into a thick hot stew, which provides 1 meal for up to 4 people per gallon. Okay, that's alright. Then there are Hook of Fisher's Delight, which is just a upgraded fishing hook. So any of you who played World of Warcraft, you need to upgrade the fishing pole to get better stuff. Lantern of Tracking, which is kind of nice. It can track certain kinds of creatures, which is determined by rolling on the table. Once it's determined, it cannot be changed. It's cool if you get something interesting, but there are 10 options: aberrations, celestials, constructs, dragons, elemental, fae, fiends, giants, monstrosities, and undead. Now, if you had some sort of a campaign against undead and evil, and you had this lantern that could track undead, that would be pretty cool. Otherwise, very limited use. Then we come to which is one of the more interesting items. In a lot of these adventures, at least with Avernus, they want to give you a Disney-like pet. You know, sort of like a little animal friend. So in Avernus, you have the Hollyphant. Now they give you a Professor Orb. And the orb you find is named Professor Scant. Professor Scant, it has its own personality and it's sort of a knowledge dump. So it has expertise in 4 areas: the history of Netheril, vampirism and the traits of vampires, rituals surrounding the making, bottling, and drinking of Elverquist, which is an elven liqueur that needs sunshine and rare summer fruits. I don't know where you're going to find that useful. And it knows a lot about Tarrasques. Okay, that's pretty interesting. But it's got its own personality that they tell you to play. I gotta say, it's kind of with the purpose of giving you these cutesy, quirky side characters is. It's nice on occasion, but really, it's getting to be like all those side characters in Disney movies. Next thing you know, you're going to have to start singing about your adventures. There's a scroll of terror summoning, a thermal cube, which is actually pretty cool, 3-inch cube of solid brimstone that generates enough dry heat to keep the temperature within 15 feet of it at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's a little bit warm. I'm not quite sure why you'd want 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It's even a little too low for slow-cooked barbecue. And then we have one of the more interesting items that unfortunately doesn't come up until the end, Icewind Mythalar. The Icewind Mythalar is a crystal ball in an ornate cradle, and it sheds bright light, but the real purpose is to control the weather. And this is what Oriole uses. It has the following properties. While you're on the same plane as existence, the Mythalar, you can use an action to cause it to fly in any direction at a speed of 30 feet. All matter within 500 feet of the device moves with it. That sounds a little creepy, but alright. As an action, you can use one magic item you're holding to immediately regain all of its expended charges or uses. That is very cool. And you can only use that once, and then it has to recharge all of its uses on its own. And you can use it to cast Control Weather without any components and without the need for you to be outdoors. The casting of the spell has a 50-mile radius. For the duration of the spell's casting time, you must be within 30 feet of the Mythalar or it fails. So it has some cool features, but it comes too late in the game and you don't really get to use it for anything. It would be nice if they had this item in like an upgraded quest. Now, one thing, talking about Avernus, it gave you some pretty nice items straight off the bat that you could use for the whole adventure. This, to an extent, is too little too late. And in addition, any creature that touches the Mythalar has to make a DC 22 con save, or you take 180 radiant damage on a failed save. Half as much damage on a successful one. So, dang man, that's bad. Now, one nice thing it does have, there are 2 books, Codicil the White, which will give you some information on Oriole, and also you can learn Frost Fingers, which is a pretty good new spell that they introduced for this. And then there's another book, The Incantations of Eiroli Larthus, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong there. And it's got a bunch of different spells that you can learn by reading it from level 1 to 9. So it's pretty good. A couple new wizard spells, Blade of Disaster, which is 9th level. You just basically make a blade, it hits target for 4d12 force damage, it crits on an 18 or higher, and the crit deals an extra 8d12 force damage, so you have a total of 12d12. It's alright, but at level 9, And create Megan. I used to date a girl named Megan, so I'm just going to skip that one. And then Frost Fingers, which is a level 1 spell. Freezing cold blast from your fingertips in a 15-foot cone. So it's sort of a pre-cone of cold cone. It does 2d8 damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. So that's pretty good overall. I mean, on a cone, so you can hit a bunch of different creatures with that. Alright, so Icewind Dale Rime of the FrostMaiden. I would probably, had I not bought it to review, I probably would not buy it. It does have a nice adventure if you want to start somewhere in what has been a really hot summer. If you want a different setting, a cold setting that you probably haven't used before, this is a nice book. But overall, it's just a little bit weak. There's not enough extras. The storyline is kind of okay. It's pretty standard D&D. I think it's going to go down in history as like a discount chult, or probably around the strength of the quests in Ghosts of Saltmarsh without the benefit of all the extra information in Saltmarsh. All right, everyone, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Tell me down below, what did you think of this module from D&D?